You're listening to the Candid Comms podcast with Rachel Miller. Tune in for practical advice and inspirational ideas to help you focus on all things internal communication related. Hello and welcome to the show. In today's episode, we are going to be thinking about AI, artificial intelligence. I cannot record a season of Candid Comms and not have an episode that looks at AI. So if you were waiting for me to cover AI this season, you are in the right place. As ever, you will leave with one thing to know, one thing to do, and one thing to think about. You'll probably want a notebook for this one. Are you ready? Let's get started. Let's start by busting some jargon. Artificial intelligence refers to the simulation of human intelligence in machines that are designed to think and act like humans. It is achieved by developing algorithms and computer programs that can perform tasks that typically require human intelligence, such as visual perception, speech recognition, decision making, and language translation. Now, that definition is from the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, and I'll include a link in the show notes if you want to read more about their work. That's from a paper that they published in 2023. So thinking about that, something we need to be mindful of as internal communicators in particular is that simulation of human intelligence in machines. Now, this isn't something to fear. There is so much fear around when we look at artificial intelligence and who's doing what. I am having constant conversations with clients and comms friends, and the fear isn't just everything's going to be automated, what's going to happen to my job. That's certainly happening, and I'll share some stats with you in a moment on that. But the fear also is, oh my goodness, am I behind? The amount of conversations that I've had with clients where they say, Rachel, who's doing what? What do we need to know? What have we missed? Are we behind? Who's ahead? Who can I talk to? Comms friends, we are all learning. Right now, as I'm recording this episode, as we head into the final quarter of 2025, we have seen a rapid rollout of AI systems in recent years. However, I am yet to find outstanding examples of who exactly is using AI for internal communication. I know that it's happening. I know that it's happening in pockets, in small parts within organisations. Unless companies go all in, unless companies have invested hugely in their own systems, companies like EY, for example. Inside most organisations, what I'm observing is that there is AI use both internally and externally. In other words, employees are experimenting with AI in their personal lives, and very often they're coming into work and not experimenting with AI at work because the guardrails aren't in place. There isn't clarity around what am I allowed to use. We've been here before. Back in 2012, I wrote a chapter in Share This, the social media handbook for PR professionals, which was published by Wiley. And I was looking at the rise of social media and its potential impact on internal communication and employee engagement. And when I was writing about the future, I said back in 2012, the focus will be on connections, collaboration, and communication. Who's doing what, where they're doing it, what they think of it, and how others can get involved. I also predicted that we'd see remote working becoming more popular as technology means people don't need to physically be in the same building to feel connected and engaged with their peers and managers across the globe. And I described the role of internal communicators to ensure the right channels are in place to enable communication to happen. Now, those predictions have been realised in ways that I couldn't have anticipated, not least due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Internal communication has always been critical to help people and organisations thrive. And at a global scale, we experience the importance of credible, accurate and reliable information to keep employees and their loved ones informed and safe, particularly during COVID. Communication unites workforces, it nurtures a sense of belonging, and it creates opportunities for leaders to be visible and reassuring. Companies are striving to make meaningful connections amongst employees, and internal communication is used as the medium to aid the flow of information and knowledge sharing. That was the case back in 2012. It was the case when I started my internal communication career in 2003, and the same is true today. If we look ahead to the future, the fundamental principles of internal communication will remain unchanged. Comms friends, if you've listened to Candid Comms before, you will know that I describe the purpose of internal communication isn't about telling people what to do. It's to create a shared understanding and meaning. And only when this happens can employees work together towards a company's goals. What I'm referring to there is alignment. That irrefutable role of internal communication will not change. Every decade that I've worked in this wonderful world of internal communication, we've had new tech. I am old enough to remember when we rolled out mobile phones inside organisations. I'm laughing because my children find it hilarious that I call them mobile phones because they don't know of any other type of phones. Obviously, I do remember having a landline, and therefore I call my cell phone, if you're in the US, my mobile phone. But that amuses my children no end. So I'm trying to train myself out of saying mobile phone, but bear with me, this is ingrained behaviour. But I am old enough to remember when mobiles were rolled out inside organisations, and there was a real fear. There was a concern that employees would be calling their loved ones internationally from these devices. And in the words of my husband, John, he has a wonderful quote that he uses, which I love. So thank you, John Miller, for this quote, which is, we need to trust employees to do the right thing rather than assume that they'll do the wrong thing. Trust them to do the right thing rather than assume they'll do the wrong thing. And so that was the case when we rolled out mobiles. Yes, of course, people suddenly had the ability to be able to call internationally if they so wished, and they could call their friends and families. But they've always had that capability. When we had landlines, that hadn't really changed, but the fear factor was there. I remember we then rolled out Blackberries, and people had more than a phone in their pocket. They were able to access emails. You know, my children today, my twins are 10 and my daughter's 13. A blackberry is a fruit that we pick from our garden. They don't know what a blackberry is in relation to technology. They know what apple is, but they don't know what blackberry is. Times have changed. Our role as internal communicators has been to be open, to be curious, to be inquisitive, to experiment, and to put those guardrails in place. I talk a lot about our role and organisations' roles to create flexibility within boundaries. I remember back in 2008 when I was looking at social media and picking up on all of the amazing things that were starting to happen, and we hadn't really talked about how to use social media for internal communication. And I was so curious about that, and I thought, is that a possibility? And I started to research it. At the time, I was working full-time in-house in the railway, and I was also studying the course, which is now the Masters in Internal Communication Management, which is run by the Institute of Internal Communication. Back then, it was the postgraduate diploma in Internal Communication Management run through Kingston University and the Institute of Internal Communication. And in 2009, at the start of 2009, I was deep into my studies with Kingston and the IOIC, and I decided to specialise for my dissertation for my final project. And if you've studied that course in its old format or its current format, you will know just how much work you have to do for that course. So hats off to you if you have completed that qualification. I'll include some links in the show notes at allthingsic.com/podcast in the show notes for this episode if you want to find out more about that course. I thoroughly recommend it. It was the start of 2009 and I decided to join Twitter. I also decided to create a blog, which I still write today. And at that time, I realised that it felt like we were on the cusp of something and I didn't know what it was. I could see that people were starting to work out loud and I could see that we were starting to talk about collaboration a lot more, not just about how internal communicators could look at this mindset of collaboration and apply it internally, how we could encourage people to work out loud inside the organisation and create a horizontal network, as I describe it, rather than a hierarchical or linear flows of communication inside organisation and networks of people. We suddenly had the ability to surface previously invisible people, locations, ideas, innovations. And I thought, my goodness me, this potential is huge. And I didn't know what I didn't know. And I decided to start my blog to share my thinking, particularly as I was researching for my dissertation. And I looked at what is the role of social media when it comes to internal communication. How can we learn from the external platforms? What are the behaviours that employees are doing in their personal life that actually there's a real business benefit when we are working out loud and we're reducing time, money and effort spent searching for information? What if we had really robust methods of knowledge management inside our organisations? On that topic, I have been a guest speaker at that course, the IOIC course, for about 15 years now. And throughout that time, the topic that I teach has evolved. It used to be purely social media. Then it moved into social media and knowledge management. And now, as I'm recording this, I've delivered that talk for this year already in 2025. And for the current cohort of students, the topic that I was teaching covered social media knowledge management, which is what we know about an organisation. So what an organisation knows about itself and how work gets done. I mean, it's more than that, but that's a summarised version. And it also then included AI. So even taking that as a snapshot view of what we're teaching and what we're thinking about at the high levels and the deep levels, if you like, of internal communication theory and management, we've shifted in that snapshot of time in 15 years from thinking about social media to thinking about knowledge management to now thinking about AI. In 2008-9, I started looking at Yammer, which was a standalone company at the time. Today, we know Yammer as Viva Engage, and it is embedded into Microsoft 365. And if you are working in an organisation that has 365, you will know it as Viva Engage. Whether it's turned on or off inside your organisation, we could go down a whole rabbit hole on that, but we won't today. But the point is, it's integrated inside lots of organisations. That wasn't the mindset, comms friends. Back in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12 particularly, if you wanted to be social, if you wanted to collaborate, to work out loud with people inside your organisation, using that application of how we were using social media externally in our personal lives, you had to go to the website, which was yammer.com. And then it was called the freemium model. And you could go to it, put in your work email address and discover if there was a network. And this absolutely fascinated me. I remember when I launched my business, All Things I See, in 2013, I was having discussions with clients who were saying, oh, well, Rachel, we're not sure about this Yammer thing. We don't know whether we're ready for this mindset around social media, and we don't think that it's really for us. We're not really sure. So we're just not going to dive into it. And I would say, do me a favour, open a browser and go to yammer.com and put your email address in, your work email address in. And clients would go, okay. And what would happen is when you went to that website and you put in your email address, you would see whether there was already a network in place. And what would happen more often than not was people inside an organisation, even if the comms pros or IT pros said, well, we're not really ready for this. We don't know what it is. We're not really sure. we'll just hope it goes away. Employees had seen the value for themselves and they'd started to log in, they'd created networks and they'd started to work together. That is what we're seeing today when it comes to AI inside organisations. It's that same behaviour where you have employees who see the value, who are early adopters, who want to discover it for themselves. Whether we are ready or not as organisations, if our employees have discovered the value for themselves and it's helping them save time, save money, save effort, they're going to be using whatever they can. And this is where I think a lot of the fear has come in around the tools and the methodologies and the tactics that are being used by employees in their personal lives. You need to have the conversation internally. So what we need to know is, what is our mindset inside our organisation when it comes to AI? What are those guardrails? What's the etiquette? What are you putting in place? Have you given your employees permission to experiment? And if so, have you set the parameters? What are they allowed to use? What are they not allowed to use? You don't need me to tell you this, but it's worth repeating, so I will. But we need to be mindful of proprietary information. In other words, what are you uploading? We do not want our employees to be uploading sensitive company information into external third-party sites. That feels really obvious and really, it should be common sense. But how often is that happening? Do you know? Do you know how that's happening inside your organisation? Simply locking something down doesn't mean that employees don't know that it exists. Far better is to open the conversation internally, have a discussion, bring people together, encourage them to innovate together. So that's what we need to know. What we need to do is to get organised. I encourage you to listen back. I've recorded a number of episodes on AI in previous seasons, in particular looking at an ethics paper that was produced by the Institute of Internal Communication. I also looked at some research from the Chartered Institute of Public Relations. There is so much out there when it comes to AI and research, particularly from a comms perspective. There's some really good advice and guidance around, and I'll collate some of them in the show notes for this episode. What I want you to do is to think about your organisation, and I want you to think about who are the decision makers when it comes to AI. The obvious ones would be your IT team, your comms team, probably your HR or people team. Everyone has a slightly different lens on the situation, both in terms of how we treat each other when we're using AI, how we're treating the systems that we're using. In other words, what information are we able to share? What are we not able to share? You need to be aware of the parameters and the governance that you have in place. So bringing together people to look at AI from their different respective parts of the business makes sense. Now, a bit of a caveat from me, so I'm just going to roll with it, but you could argue that internal communicators are not the people who should be responsible for bringing everybody together to have conversations. And that would be a fair thing to say. However, the reality is we have excellent relationships inside our organisations. If we're doing our jobs well, if we are working as strategic internal communicators, if we are thoroughly aware of our organisation, we know it's our business to know our business and to have excellent working relationships, then you probably are the right person to bring people together because you know who needs to be in a room. Make sure that you also include employees. There is nothing worse than the powers that be getting together to decide, particularly if you're talking about governance and infrastructure and rollouts and plans. Make sure that employees are in that mix. One way is having a call to action in whatever methodology you use inside your organisation for internal communication. To say this is our intention, we want to look at using AI and encouraging employees to make themselves known to you and say, if you'd like to be part of a network group or a working group, whatever you want to call it, innovation group, then to make themselves known. Do let me know how you got on with that. I'd love to know what you do and what you experiment with and decisions that you make. We know the power of peer-to-peer communication, comms friends. It's far more powerful. It's far more interesting, frankly, when we use peer-to-peer communication, which I describe as people like you doing things like this. So imagine you are rolling out a new policy or new ways of working using AI. How would it go down if you have that coming from the director of IT or the lead for tech and data or the director of communication? And then how would it go down with employees if it came from their peers? If it was their peers saying, this is what's in place, this is what we've been experimenting with, this is what we encourage you to use. It feels different, doesn't it? It resonates in a better way because it feels more relevant. When you have peer-to-peer communication, it's incredibly powerful when you're able to use it for good. If you're able to help employees imagine themselves in the scenarios that you're painting. These are the things that we've been using AI for. Here's how we found it. Sharing stories. Storytelling is one of the very best methods to use. The shortest distance between two people is a story. I can't remember who said that. I'll try and find that. I love that quote. It's on the wall behind my desk. Shortest distance between two people is a story. If you have a story and you're able to say, I didn't know what AI was, but I was curious, I signed up, I wanted to get involved to understand how we can use it inside our organisation. This is the business problem I had. This is how AI has helped me, etc. And you're able to really personalise it and bring it to life. That's far more interesting and far more relevant for employees than here is our AI governance policy, here is our etiquette. You need that as part of the conversation, obviously, but don't lead with that. Lead with the story, lead with the human interest. When there is fear around this technology and humans being replaced, what we're trying to do, what I encourage you to do, is to bring out the humanity. What is it that we're able to use this technology for, and what is it that it can't do? What is irreplaceable and the human aspect? The IC Index 2025 was a question set that was developed by the Institute of Internal Communication and Ipsos Carrion and Box. And it's well worth checking out. I'll include a link in the show notes for you. It had a representative quota sample of 4,939 UK workers aged between 18 and 64, and they were surveyed online between March and April 2025. And in the IC Index, they have a section called What Are Employees' Hopes and Fears Around AI? And I'm conscious that I've talked about fears, so I want to balance it by talking about hopes as well. And that's what this piece of research has done. They asked UK employees what they worry about when it comes to the use of generative artificial intelligence, or Gen AI, in their organisation. And the loss of human jobs was the most common worry, and it's on the minds of 48% of employees. That was followed by data privacy and security for 36% of people, and a third said they were concerned about the lack of transparency and spread of misinformation. 3 in 10 people worry about unethical use, and over a quarter have concerns about poor quality of work. Just under a quarter said they were worried about copyright or plagiarism, and 17% about the amplification of existing bias and discrimination. So when it comes to the excitement about Gen AI, the research found the top 3 positives are automation of day-to-day tasks, increased productivity, and saving time. They also asked about creativity, which I found really interesting. Just under 1 in 4 people who replied to this study said they felt that AI can improve creativity, and the same proportion said they feel positively about improvements to processes and customer experience. 22% said Gen AI can lead to reduced human error, and 1 in 5 said it could help with reviewing or finessing. Interestingly, the study looked at size of organisations and used that as a way to slice and dice the data, and it found that employees who work in smaller organisations are more likely to feel there are positives to using Gen AI, And they're particularly more likely to say it could improve creativity, with 41% of employees from organisations of 500 to 999 employees seeing it as a potential positive, compared to just 15% in the largest of organisations. I found that really interesting. Really, really interesting. I think those answers around what's useful, what people are excited about, it's about releasing us from the day-to-day things, the automation of day-to-day tasks to increase productivity, save us time, improve creativity, improve processes and customer experience, and reduce human error. There's lots of interesting things in there, and this isn't something to fear. I remember back in 2012 writing on my blog about how I saw our roles changing from content creators to content curators. And I know that I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but the pushback I got on that was fierce. I had a lot of internal communicators saying that they disagreed with me, and that's fine. Everyone has their own opinion. I realised at that time that the role of what we were doing was changing. It wasn't all about our bylines, which is your name on an article. And as a former journalist, your byline is important. It was always important to me, until I realised it actually wasn't. It's not about you. It's not about the stories that you're writing or the content that you're creating. It's actually about how you, as an internal communicator, can curate conversations and content inside an organisation. When I say content, I mean stories, I mean videos. It's the overarching term that we give to mean information that's produced, communication that happens. So whether it's a video or a short update or digital signage or whatever it might be. But thinking about that, we aren't the only ones who produce all of those things nowadays. What we're seeing inside organisations and what has happened, particularly over the last decade or so, is that role has shifted from us being the sole creators to now curating. We've been encouraging our employees to use their own devices, to create their own stories, to vlog, to blog, to work out loud, to live tweet, if you like, from events that they go to. Nowadays, that's part and parcel of the way that conversations happen and communication happens inside organisations. I look at a lot of digital workplaces and intranets, particularly through industry award schemes that I might be judging, or some of my clients, or also my husband's clients. And when I'm looking at an intranet, I describe it as a window into your culture. I should be able to cover over the logo of that intranet and see the richness of your organisation, see your culture in action. That means seeing what's important to the organisation and its people. Normally, I can see user-generated stories, which is a really clunky phrase. Employee stories is what I mean. It's called user-generated content, UGC. What it means is when I'm looking at a website, I'm looking at an intranet, I want to see what makes you special and unique. And what makes you special and unique is not just the people that you're serving or the clients that you're helping or the patients that you're working alongside. It is your people. It is your employees. It is their passion. It's their stories about the work that they're doing. That is what makes organisations special. That is what you can't replicate from one organisation to another, because it's nuanced, you are unique, because you have certain ways of working, certain ways of doing things, certain styles of leadership. All of that will shape your organisation, and therefore it will shape the way that you communicate. I should be able to see that. If an intranet is a window into your world, into your culture, I should be able to see that vibrancy on the screen. I should see it. Now, that can't just come from a comms team. It's okay to let go. It is okay. I wrote about this in 2016, about the rise of wonky communications, which is, to give you that analogy and what that is, here in the UK, we have wonky vegetables inside our supermarkets. So if you go shopping and you want to buy some vegetables, you can choose the full priced, perfectly polished, immaculate looking vegetables which are a regular shape, or you can choose to pay slightly less normally for the wonky version of the vegetables. They might not be a perfectly shaped carrot. It might have lumps and bumps on it and look a bit strange and not be the regular size. However, it still functions in the same way in a stew. It still tastes the same as the perfect vegetables. So I applied this thinking to internal communication, and I remember blogging about it and saying, this is where we're at. We are seeing the rise of wonky communication inside our organisation, and that is okay. Yes, of course, when you look at a story that's been written by a comms pro, it's going to be polished. It's going to be in the correct tone. It's going to be on brand. Everything, I imagine, if we're doing our jobs well enough, is golden. It's great. It looks brilliant. And when you look at a story from an employee, maybe it's not quite right. Maybe they have said staff and you use colleagues, or maybe they're using terminology that you're not using anymore, and it's not quite in the same polished, perfect form as the comms pro. That is okay. I promise you, that is okay. If we are trying to be strategic, if we are trying to prove our worth and demonstrate our value, and all of these conversations that take up so many conversation spaces online and so many discussions and dominate so many conference agendas, what if we gave ourselves the permission to let go of the things that don't matter? The best way to do this, in my experience, is to give people a one-page guide of how to write a story. Tell them what's important to the organisation. Explain why you say employees rather than staff, rather than locking everything down and having this comms police mindset, which I wrote about in my first book, Internal Communication Strategy. Rather than having that mindset, if you're trying to be a trusted advisor and you're trying to work strategically, then don't get swallowed up in terms of your time by focusing on the small stuff. I wonder if you agree with me or if you disagree. Do let me know. I'd love to know. I'm not saying that not having the correct tone of voice isn't important, and I'm not saying that you let everything slip. I'm saying to choose your battles and create that flexibility within boundaries that I talked about before when I was talking about using enterprise social networks and using AI. The same is true for day-to-day internal communication. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, I'm going to leave you with something to think about. Candid Comms is brought to you by All Things IC. I established the consulting business back in 2013 to help organisations unlock the power of corporate communication and transform from the inside out. We do this by increasing internal communicators' skills, knowledge, and confidence. You can find consulting, mentoring, and one-to-one support on our website, allthingsic.com. You can work with us in person or remotely, wherever you are in the world. We're here to help. The best way to get in touch with me is via hello@allthingsic.com. Welcome back. We are going to conclude our conversation about AI today by what you need to think about. Now, I know I've probably given you quite a bit to think about already, but I'm going to close this conversation by reading an extract from my book, Internal Communication Strategy. And it's an expert view that was written by Stuart Bruce. Stuart is internationally recognised as a PR futurist and a pioneer in modernised public relations and corporate affairs. His primary areas of expertise are PR strategy, corporate communication, communication measurement and evaluation, public affairs, crisis communication, digital and social media, and digital transformation, also including the selection and implementation of PR technology. He is co-founder of the communications team performance improvement consultancy, Purposeful Relations, and the founder of reputation and crisis communications consultancy, Stuart Bruce Associates. Now, writing in my book, he was describing the rise of comtech, which is communication technology. We don't really use that phrase very much, but when I'm reading research like Gartner papers, comtech is used more by people who work in IT than people who work in comms. But if you've not looked at comtech, COMMTECH, if you've not looked up comtech as a phrase, have a look, because you might discover something that will help you. Stuart wrote for me about the proliferation of comtech and how it has risen in recent years and continues to grow. He says, according to research conducted by Purposeful Relations and Provoke Media, more than half, 56%, of PR and communications practitioners globally say they are extremely competent or competent in their use of communication technology. And their research revealed the gap between in-house and agency practitioners and how it is widening. That gap is widening in terms of competent use of communication technology. And it stated many still use spreadsheets for business critical processes, including project management, 41%, and managing contacts, 39%. Stuart says there is a reality gap between how good respondents think they are at using technology and how they are really using it. And I think that's fair. I think that's a fair reflection. He says the results show that respondents often aren't using the right tools or even using a tool at all. One of the main costs for most PR and communications activity is staff time. Despite this, time is not being used effectively. Often respondents aren't adopting and even using the most basic communication technology. And he cautions this has a negative impact on results that are delivered, querying how it's possible to deliver best possible results without using the most effective tools. Stuart says that rapidly emerging AI tools will make it easier for comms pros to analyse and understand complex interactions. A lot of the early AI focus has been on using generative AI based on external data sources from the internet. The ability to use AI technology to analyse a myriad of previously inaccessible internal data sources will unlock huge opportunities for corporate communications, says Stuart. At the end of Stuart's expert view in my book, I wrote that the potential of AI for internal communication is evolving, and I'm excited to see what the future brings. It won't replace the job of an internal communicator, but someone who understands its role may. Automating tasks should create capacity for humans to do what only we can. It will save you time, but you still need to apply emotional intelligence, company-specific terminology and tone. Check the facts and verify information generated by AI. Be cautious and do not share confidential company information. The Institute of Internal Communication, as quoted in the IC Index, say, when thinking about clarity on AI, there's still a considerable fear from employees around the use of Gen AI, with only 41% of employees saying their organisation has been clear on its responsible use. So the need for clarity is even more urgent. They say organisations that aren't proactive in their approach and communication are open to risk. Even in organisations where Gen AI won't be used, clarity on this position and why it's the right one for the organisation is needed. If you haven't done that, comms friends, if your organisation has made a decision about what is and isn't available to be used for your employees, for your workforce, have you clarified that? Have you communicated that? And have you explained why this is the case? Is it a no, not now? Is it a no, never? Or is it something you're going to address in future? Do people understand what's going on? Have you provided them with clarity? As always, they say managers will have a big part to play in creating that clarity. Internal communicators can advise on the organisational level approach, say IOIC, and support with guidance for managers in leading conversations. Many managers may have little to no knowledge on this topic, so making the support clear and simple will be even more critical than usual. I like the fact that there's a huge dose of reality at the end of this report where it says, IC professionals in large organisations may need to wade through more red tape and resistance to get the clarity needed to communicate effectively on this ever-evolving topic, but tackling that challenge head-on should certainly be near the top of their to-do list. I wonder what you're taking away from this episode. I've tried to give you a rounded picture of some of the conversations that are happening about AI at the moment. There's many more avenues that we can explore together and many more conversations to be had. If you have a particular angle you'd like me to focus on, why not get in touch with me? I love hearing from you. Do let me know what you would find useful for me to cover on the Candid Comms podcast. I'm going to share something with you that's coming up in my brand new book, Successful Change Communication. It will be published next year. But within that book, I've looked at how to use AI for change communication. And I have profiled a number of people, including Frank Diaz, who has specialised in internal communication and AI. Frank was a guest on, I think it was season 1 or 2, one of the very early seasons of the Candid Comms podcast. I'll include a link to my conversation with Frank from a good few years ago. But today he specialises in using AI and IC. So I invited him to write an expert view for successful change communication, and he kindly did so. So you can expect to see that when the book drops in 2026. Don't forget, you can get in touch with me by emailing hello@allthingsic.com, or why not find me on LinkedIn? Just look for Rachel Miller. Thank you for tuning in. I look forward to spending more time with you in a future episode of Candid Comms. And remember, what happens inside is reflected outside. See you again soon.